My wife chose her real dad over me, so I walked away quietly, let the wedding collapse, and turned 18 years of fatherhood into silence forever. She wants her real dad to walk her down the aisle. Those words dropped like a lead weight in the middle of the dining room table, settling between my cold pork chops and Diane's glass of Pinot like a dead thing. I didn't flinch. I didn't curse or knock over my chair, which I am sure disappointed her a little. She wanted a reaction, something messy she could turn into my problem. But I just looked at her. No blinking, no breath, just looked. She didn't meet my eyes. She said it wouldn't feel right. Diane continued, suddenly very interested in rearranging the folds of her napkin. She's been reconnecting with Alan. You know, since he reached out. He didn't reach out, I cut in, voice flat. You did, you hunted him down on Facebook last year, remember? Said it was important for Natalie's sense of identity. I leaned back in the chair. I guess it worked. Diane's lip curled just slightly. Not a snarl, not quite, something reptilian. This doesn't have to be dramatic, Mark. No, of course not. God forbid we let truth get in the way of a good Instagram moment. I stood up slowly, feeling every joint in my 65-year-old body click like a filing cabinet drawer. I walked to the window. The garden outside was blooming early this year. I'd spent 3 weekends lining those beds with mulch and creeping thyme. Natalie loved the smell when she was little. 18 years, I said. Diane stayed silent. I took her to the emergency room when she got that peanut stuck in her throat. I taught her to drive. She screamed at me when I wouldn't buy her a BMW. I gave up promotions because she didn't want to move schools. I turned, and now I'm not even invited to the wedding. Diane sighed. You are invited. She just doesn't want you walking her down the aisle. Alan is a sperm donor who bailed before the ink dried on her birth certificate, I said sharply, then quieter, and I was the idiot who filled the space. Silence. She stared at her wine, swirling it lazily. Mark, don't make this a thing. It's not personal. It's just how she feels. She doesn't want drama at the ceremony. Drama? Yes, she said. You know how people are. 2 dads walking her down the aisle would raise questions. It's better this way. I laughed. Just once. No humor in it. Who paid for the venue? I asked. Or the dress? Or the damn monogrammed napkins you insisted on from that overpriced Etsy vendor? Diane looked up. What's your point? My point, I said, walking past her to the stairs, is I was supposed to give a toast. You know that, right? I already wrote it. She blinked at me. I'll leave it on the table. Then I turned and walked up to my study. My footsteps didn't echo, but the silence did. I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up a new browser tab. One search, Solo Trips Italy, May. I didn't book the first one I saw. I clicked through 5 or 6. I checked reviews, looked at photos. I even smiled a little at one that said, best trip of my life. Didn't even think about the wedding I missed. Perfect. I booked a suite overlooking the sea in Positano. 2 weeks, full breakfast, balcony view, non-refundable. I opened another tab, pulled up a folder titled Natalie's Wedding. I deleted it. Next, I opened a password manager and exported every shared login. Netflix, bank, mortgage, utilities, even her stupid yoga subscription. I printed them all. 3 pages. I signed the bottom in blue ink and slid the papers into an envelope. On the second page, I clipped the toast. It started with, you were never mine by blood, Natalie, but you were mine in every way that mattered. I didn't read the rest. I already knew how it ended. I set the envelope on the table beside Diane's wine glass. She hadn't moved. Then I walked upstairs, packed 1 carry-on bag, and pulled the tuxedo from the closet. I looked at it for a moment, fingers resting on the hanger. I left it there. Let Alan wear it or not. It didn't matter. I was already gone. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of grief, not even anger, just clarity. A kind of cold, surgical focus that I hadn't felt since my final structural assessment before retirement. You know the kind where if you get the math wrong, an overpass collapses and 10 families get phone calls they never forget. This wasn't a collapse. Not yet. But the hairline fractures had been ignored for too long, and now I was the only one checking the stress load. I poured myself a glass of scotch. Not the good stuff, just whatever Diane hadn't dumped into sangria last weekend, and sat down with my laptop again. I opened the travel itinerary and added a line for private transfer from the Naples airport. No more rental cars, no more compromises, just silence, and the sound of my own breathing. Then came the wedding logistics folder, passwords, receipts, timelines. You wouldn't believe how many moving parts go into an event that I was now conveniently uninvited from. I'd paid the deposit for the photographer. Canceled it. That one stung a little. Not because I wanted the pictures, but because I remembered how excited Natalie had been when she showed me the portfolio. "Mark, he captures light like it's alive," she'd said. I clicked cancel reservation. Goodbye, light. The band was prepaid. Let them play to an empty dance floor if it came to that. I wasn't chasing refunds. I was extracting myself quietly, efficiently. Next was the envelope. I printed out the master password sheet, took my time, triple-checked everything. Bank login, joint accounts, the Netflix profile I always used because I never bothered to make my own. The email I set up for wedding RSVPs, all of it. The digital leash I'd let wrap around my neck one click at a time over 18 years. I clipped my toast to the back of the packet, typed, double-spaced, printed on thick linen paper like it was going to a courtroom instead of a dinner table. Diane might not read it. Natalie sure as hell wouldn't, but I wanted them both to feel the weight of it, even if they never read a word. I sealed it. Just Diane on the front. No flourish, no PS, no bitterness. The tuxedo stayed in the closet. I stared at it for a moment. Dark navy, tailored. I remember trying it on 6 months ago. Natalie clapped like a seal when she saw me in it. "You look like a Bond villain," she said, grinning. I remember thinking how funny it was. She didn't say hero. I left it hanging. I zipped my carry-on shut. A few button-downs, one pair of dress shoes, habit, and my favorite paperback copy of A Movable Feast. Hemingway understood exile. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet, chosen kind. I stepped out into the hallway. Diane's wine glass was still on the table, half full. The envelope sat beside it like a paper guillotine. She was upstairs, I assumed, probably in bed, texting Natalie updates about how well he's taking it. I didn't say goodnight. I didn't turn off the light. I walked out of the house at 5:11 in the morning. The only sound was the click of the lock behind me. At the airport, I paid for a lounge upgrade. I sat in leather silence while a flat-screen television showed morning news without sound. I didn't look at my phone once. The flight to Naples boarded on time. Window seat 19 Alpha. The man next to me looked like he wanted to make conversation. I smiled faintly and put in my headphones before he got the chance. As the plane lifted off the tarmac, I exhaled slow and deep. Not relief, not escape, just deletion. One deliberate line of code at a time. And the truly absurd part, no one called to ask where I was. "Mark's being very mature about it," Diane said with a casual sip of her mimosa. The stem of her glass pinched between two fingers like she was holding court instead of brunch. They were sitting outside, at some overpriced cafe that Natalie adored. String lights, fake ivy on the walls, everything photogenic and hollow. Her bridesmaids nodded approvingly, like Diane had just said something noble instead of deeply condescending. "He said he understood," she continued, flipping her sunglasses up onto her head. "Didn't make a scene. Just left it in our hands. Left it in your hands." That part she didn't say out loud, but it hung there like the check she never offers to pick up. Natalie, radiant in a white off-the-shoulder sundress meant to mimic innocence, snapped a selfie and uploaded it with the caption, "Pre-wedding brunch vibes, ring crown. Can't wait for my real dad to walk me down the aisle." Exclamation marks, all capital letters, and a queen emoji. I saw it later through a second-hand screen. The post got 142 likes in 10 minutes. Alan liked it too, from his account with exactly 2 photos and a bio that still read single chill grill master. He commented a fire emoji. Diane reacted to it. Somewhere in that moment, the idea of Mark began to fade into background noise for them. He was reduced to a footnote in their own wedding myth. The guy who raised her was now just a line on a thank you card they hadn't written yet. Alan arrived in town the following Thursday. Diane picked him up from the airport in the Camry that still had my National Parks pass on the rear view. He got in wearing a turquoise button-down 2 sizes too tight and aviators that looked like they were smuggled out of a pawn shop in 1993. "Traffic's insane," he said as he flopped into the passenger seat, already complaining. "Transportation Security Administration was ridiculous. I told him I was coming in for my daughter's wedding and they didn't even smile." Diane smiled. "Well, at least you're here now." "Yeah," he said, adjusting his waistband. "I'm just glad I'm finally getting my shot, you know," he turned to her, "to be a dad." She nodded like that was a noble thing, like 18 years of radio silence could be erased by a tie and a bouquet. At the venue walkthrough that weekend, Alan arrived 30 minutes late. Claimed his global positioning system got weird near the country club entrance. When the planner offered to go over the timeline with him, he interrupted, I got it, I'm good with schedules. I used to coach junior varsity basketball, remember?" He hadn't. Still, he insisted on giving a little speech during the rehearsal dinner. Said something about always feeling a connection, even from afar. There were polite chuckles. Someone clinked a glass too early. Natalie beamed, but her smile twitched at the edges. He called her Pumpkin twice. She hated that nickname. During the cake tasting, he asked if carrot cake came from actual carrots. The baker blinked twice and changed the subject. Diane told people I was overseas for a consulting thing. She said it like I was off chasing spreadsheets and not sitting barefoot on a balcony in southern Italy, sipping lemon and watching seagulls fight over a crust of bread. There was no panic yet, no cracks in the wall, just a collective delusion that everything was going according to plan, that the guy with barbecue stains on his khakis and an expired license was going to somehow step into the shoes of 18 steady years. He promised Natalie he'd be on time the day of the wedding. He looked her in the eyes, hand on her shoulder like a politician, and said, "I'm not going to let you down." She smiled again. No one noticed her hand twitch. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be classy. Natalie wanted French Riviera meets Charleston charm, whatever the hell that meant. So Diane booked a garden venue with string quartet covers of Billie Eilish and overpriced tapas that looked like appetizers for mice. The tables were covered in ivory linen and labeled with calligraphed cards: bride's family, groom's party, important friends. I didn't have a card. I wasn't even a ghost. I was a deleted file. Alan showed up 45 minutes late. His shirt was wrinkled, not just from the drive, but like it had been shoved in a suitcase for 3 years, and only remembered this morning it had a job to do. His tie hung loose around his neck like it was trying to escape, and his cheeks flushed the way only cheap hotel bourbon can achieve. Diane saw him first. Her expression didn't crack, but her fingers gripped the stem of her wineglass so hard I half expected it to shatter. Traffic was hell, he announced to the table, arms raised like Moses parting the Red Sea of hors d'oeuvres. And parking, forget it. No one had mentioned parking. He made his rounds the way a drunk uncle does. Except this drunk uncle was allegedly walking the bride down the aisle in less than 24 hours. He hugged the groom, called him Eric. His name was Evan. He looked at one of Natalie's college friends and said, "Didn't I see you at Natalie's 8th grade play?" The woman blinked. "I met her in law school." He waved it off. Right, law school. That's what I meant." Later, he cornered one of the groomsmen to talk about cryptocurrency, offered him some tips, and said he'd been following Bitcoin since the early 90s. No one corrected him. They just nodded politely and drifted toward the shrimp skewers. Natalie hadn't spoken a word since Alan arrived. She smiled thin, brittle, like she was trying to keep the whole damn night glued together with dental floss and prayer. Her fiancé whispered something in her ear at one point. She nodded but didn't answer, just stared at her plate while the ice in her champagne flute melted. Halfway through the toasts, Alan stood. Diane flinched like she'd been slapped. "I just want to say," he slurred, clinking a fork against his water glass, "how proud I am of my little girl. She's got brains, beauty, ambition, if she gets that from her mom, I guess." He laughed too hard at his own joke. No one else joined in. Natalie didn't move. "Missed a lot," he went on, "but hey, we're here now, right? That's what matters." The maid of honor leaned toward Diane and whispered, "Are you sure about this?" Diane's smile froze. "He's just nervous," she said too quickly. "He's sentimental. Smells like vodka," the maid of honor muttered, pulling away. Alan ended his toast by raising his glass in the wrong direction and saying to the happy couple, "Mark and Natalie." A beat of silence. Then someone coughed. Alan looked around, confused. "Did I say something wrong?" Natalie finally spoke. "Just sit down," she said quietly. He did. Eventually, after knocking over a small lantern centerpiece and muttering something about how those things are always in the way, no one noticed Diane's hand shaking as she reached for her phone. But Evan noticed Natalie's tears when she excused herself to the restroom. And somewhere across the ocean, I looked out at the Tyrrhenian Sea, took a sip of wine, and smiled because the cracks were beginning to show. And some walls, they don't crack, they cave. The morning of the wedding started with a missing florist and ended with a missing father of the bride. Only one of those was expected. And it wasn't the one who was supposed to be sober and vertical. The flowers were supposed to arrive by 9:30. That's what the schedule said. Natalie had triple confirmed it. Diane had emailed, called, and left a passive-aggressive Yelp review preemptively just in case they pulled something. But by 10:15, the arch was still bare, and the bouquets were nowhere in sight. Natalie, in a silk robe and full rollers, paced the bridal suite like a war general planning a siege. Her phone buzzed constantly, every notification drawing a fresh sigh. No one had slept. Diane had snapped at the hairstylist. One of the bridesmaids cried in the bathroom over a dress zipper. Chaos, in short, had erupted early. But Alan was gone. He'd been last seen in the groomsmen's suite sometime around 8:45, clutching a protein shake and bragging about how he could still bench his body weight despite his sports hernia from high school. Evan's best man, a painfully polite software engineer named Darren, was the one who noticed his absence first.
"Anyone seen Alan?" he asked. "He's not answering his phone."
They checked the hallway, the courtyard, even the parking lot. The Camry Diane loaned him was still there, crookedly parked like it had been swerved in at the last second. Finally, Darren opened the groomsman's door and froze. Alan was snoring loudly, lying across two chairs, tie undone, shoes off, and one sock hanging off his big toe like a white flag of surrender. Next to him sat an empty bag of Doritos and a mostly full mini bottle of gin. His rental tux jacket was crumpled beneath him, like it had tried to escape the situation entirely. "Hey, Alan?" Darren nudged him. Alan grunted 5 more minutes, sweet cheeks. Darren backed out slowly and closed the door. Meanwhile, Diane paced the reception area, phone in hand. She kept unlocking it, checking messages, locking it, unlocking it again. The screen was as empty as her wine rack back home after Natalie's engagement party. No text, no voicemail, nothing. "Any word from Mark?" someone asked, an old friend from the neighborhood who still sent Christmas cards every year. Diane didn't miss a beat. "He had a work emergency overseas," she said with the tone of someone reading a weather forecast. "Something engineering related." The woman frowned. "Didn't he retire?" Diane smiled too tightly. "That's just Mark. Can't sit still." By 11:30, the florist had finally shown up, sweating, apologizing, and blaming traffic. Diane pretended to care, but her eyes kept drifting to the venue entrance. Every time the door opened, her breath caught, only to release when it wasn't me. Natalie hadn't asked about me, not once, but I know she noticed. The subtle shift in the air, the absence that felt too heavy to ignore, the missing toast, the silence. At noon, the bridal procession began its pre-ceremony photos. The photographer gave instructions no one followed. Alan was still being steamed by the coordinator and fed mints like a zoo animal. And in that chaos, Diane opened her phone one more time. The message thread with me was untouched, still pinned, still unread. The last message was hers. "Let me know if you change your mind. There's still time." I hadn't replied. Not out of cruelty, out of precision, because sometimes silence is a scalpel, and I wanted them to feel every cut. The music started, soft strings. Natalie had chosen Canon in D. Predictable, overused, but emotionally bulletproof. The kind of song that's supposed to carry a woman toward the most important moment of her life with grace and tears, and a smile she'll tell her grandkids about. But there was no smile because Alan's chair was empty. The officiant, some painfully earnest man in a tailored navy suit, stood frozen like a waiter waiting for the chef to plate the main course. He looked at the empty seat, looked at Natalie, looked back at the seat. Guests murmured. In the back row, a kid whispered, "Why isn't it starting?" The coordinator, clipboard in hand and a fake smile glued to her face like a hostage video, leaned in behind the curtain. "He was here 20 minutes ago," she whispered to Diane. "We had eyes on him." "Well then find him," Diane hissed, face flushed. Now Natalie stood gripping her bouquet, her knuckles white against the lilac roses. Her heels were just slightly too tight, her veil already slightly crooked from adjusting it herself after the stylist snapped at a bridesmaid. And now she stood alone behind that curtain, 30 seconds away from walking into a ceremony without anyone by her side. Except she wasn't alone. Everyone was watching. The string quartet faltered. One of the violinists glanced toward the coordinator, then slowed their tempo as if dragging the moment might fix it. The officiant gave Natalie a small, apologetic shrug. A nothing shrug. And then Alan appeared. Stumbled, more accurately. He came through the side aisle, not the procession entrance, like he'd wandered in from a nearby bus stop. His shirt was wrinkled again, the same shirt Diane had steamed. His tie was loose, off-center, the knot swollen like it had been strangled. His hair, which Diane had begged him to gel, stood in tufts. He gave a sloppy thumbs up to the officiant and wobbled, toward Natalie, who stood still as stone. He whispered something into her ear. Her face didn't change. Then he turned, winked broadly at the wrong woman in the front row, Natalie's godmother, who flinched and extended his elbow like it was all part of the show. Natalie didn't move. For a moment you could feel it. Every pair of eyes in the room trying not to say what they were thinking. No one laughed, not even the cousin who always found a reason to giggle during awkward moments. The air was too thick, too fragile, and Natalie, she slowly turned to the officiant and whispered, "Can I walk alone?" He paused, blinked. She didn't repeat it. She just walked alone. Each step echoed louder than the music behind her. The quartet had restarted, this time an instrumental of something modern and forgettable, but all anyone heard was her heels on tile. Click, click, click. Alan trailed behind her awkwardly, unsure whether to follow or retreat. He looked at Diane, who gave him a desperate, clenched smile that said, "Sit down, you moron." He did, finally, in a chair that screeched across the floor like it was trying to object. Natalie reached the altar. Evan took her hands gently. She didn't look up at him. Not yet. The officiant began. Something about love and commitment and the gravity of promises. And Natalie, she lowered her eyes. Not because she was moved, because humiliation, when it comes slowly, burns deepest. And in that moment, surrounded by guests, cameras, and wilting roses, she realized something she couldn't say out loud. She had traded the man who raised her for a caricature in a wrinkled tux. And the one man who might have held her steady through it all wasn't even in the room. The espresso here tastes nothing like the burnt motor oil they call coffee back in Georgia. It's sharp, almost floral, and it bites a little before it smooths out. I sit with it barefoot on a stone balcony that curves over the cliffs of Positano. The sea spread out in every direction like someone melted sapphires and let them spill across the earth. It's the kind of morning that's supposed to be ruined by messages. And believe me, they try. Buzz, buzz, pause, buzz, 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 buzz. I glance at the phone, face down on the ceramic table beside me. The screen lights up with each new attempt, a digital heartbeat, frantic and confused. First came Diane, then Natalie, then some number I don't recognize. The fiancé, a cousin, maybe the coordinator. Buzz. 23 missed calls. 48 notifications across text, WhatsApp, and email. Alan opened. I don't need to read them. I know their contents by heart because I've lived those words before in 1,000 different forms. Always too late, Mark. Something happened. You should have been here. I didn't know. I'm sorry. Delete. No preview. No hesitation. Just a swipe and a breath. The sea doesn't care. The gulls don't pause. The world keeps turning without the weight of someone else's panic on my shoulders. Across the table, I've laid out two things. A notebook and a small Canon film camera I bought from a second-hand shop in Sorrento yesterday. The clerk had called it a quiet machine. I like that. I needed quiet machines now. I pick up the camera and take a photo. Coastline, light, silence, a moment nobody else owns. On my phone, I create a new album. I call it Freedom. Not dramatic, not spiteful, just true. The first photo, the view from my room at sunrise, golden light spilling across terracotta roofs. Second, the untouched tuxedo back home, hanging like an empty promise in a dark closet. I took that picture before I left, just in case I needed a reminder. Third, this espresso, this balcony, my feet up on the rail, the sea breathing below me like it's never been betrayed. Someone once told me that grief is love with nowhere to go. But they were wrong. Grief is love finally going where it wants. And today it went to Italy. Somewhere far behind me, a wedding is unfolding like wet paper. The music, the chairs, the speeches. Maybe someone is already explaining why the father of the bride toast is missing. Maybe Diane is improvising. Maybe Natalie is crying. I wouldn't know because I'm not there, because I'm here. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I press and hold the icon on my phone, then tap Enable Do Not Disturb. The screen dims, the espresso cools slightly in my hand, and the silence, it stays. The ceremony limped across the finish line like a three-legged race in a hurricane. No one clapped when they were pronounced husband and wife. Just a few scattered exhales of relief, like the guests were grateful it was over, not moved by love. Even the flower girl looked bored, or maybe exhausted. Everyone did. Natalie smiled for the photos. Barely. Evan tried, God bless him. But even he seemed to sense that something had slipped out from under them, like the foundation had shifted just a few degrees, but enough to feel it in your bones. They cut the cake. They danced the first dance. People cheered because they were supposed to. But underneath all of it, static. It came later, just after the last speech, when most of the older guests were heading to their cars and the bar was down to bottom-shelf whiskey and melting ice. Natalie was talking to her bridesmaids when she heard raised voices near the vendor exit. Someone laughing loudly, sloppily, Alan. He was leaning against the catering truck, drinking, his tie now completely gone, shirt half untucked. Diane was trying to shush him, her voice low and desperate. I'm just saying, Alan said. It's not like I lied. You're the one who told me to say I was her dad. I didn't volunteer for this crap. Diane hissed through her teeth. Keep your voice down. What? Everyone loves a good redemption arc. The deadbeat who shows up and gets a second chance. Hell, I was this close to crying during the vows myself. He held up his fingers, squinting at them. You told her you were her real father. I told her what you told me to tell her, he snapped, then laughed again. She's not mine. Never was. You just needed a warm body and a tux to make the optics look right. Your words. That's when Natalie stepped around the corner. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just stood there, bouquet dangling, face frozen. Diane saw her first and turned white. Natalie, sweetie. You lied to me, Natalie said, her voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through bone. Both of you. Her. Diane's knees gave out and she dropped into one of the folding chairs, face like wax, mouth moving but producing nothing. Alan shrugged. Hey, I just did what I was told. A few guests turned, then more. The whispers started like ripples. What did he say? Not the real father. Then who was? Someone in the crowd, an uncle maybe, or a neighbor leaned over and asked, half joking but dead on the mark. Then where's the man who raised her? That's when Natalie snapped. She dropped the bouquet like it was poisoned and ran, heels clicking against tile, through the hallway and into the bridal suite, slamming the door behind her. Inside, she screamed. Not once, not briefly. It was the kind of scream you can only let out when your identity shatters in a single sentence. In the hall, Diane sat slumped, staring blankly at the guests around her like she couldn't understand how fast it had all gone to hell. Alan took another sip of his drink, then wandered off toward the buffet table like none of this had anything to do with him. And the guests, they started filing out slowly, quietly. No one asked for a group photo. No one stayed for dancing. Outside, someone said, "This will be the kind of wedding people talk about for years." And they will, but not for the reasons Natalie imagined, not for the reasons Diane planned. Because the one man who could have held the whole day together was gone, not dead, not lost, just absent by choice. The sun was just beginning to lower over Positano, casting long shadows across the cliffs and soaking the rooftops in gold. From my balcony, the sea looked like spilled honey, still reflective, almost too perfect to be real. The kind of view you'd think to describe in a love letter if you still believed in that sort of thing. I didn't. Not anymore. My phone sat beside a half-finished glass of red, vibrating like a dying animal. It had been doing that for hours. At first, in bursts. 3 missed calls, then silence, then a barrage, then more silence, like waves or seizures. Now, it buzzed with a kind of frantic regularity that almost felt rehearsed. I finally picked it up. No intention of responding, just curiosity. 17 missed calls from Diane, 12 from Natalie, 6 from Evan. I paused at that one. Evan, I didn't even have his number saved. I guess he got desperate enough to try anyway. Then came the texts. The preview bar was clogged with apologies, fragments, pleading punctuation. Mark, please. It all went wrong. I didn't know the truth either. You were the only real father I ever had. I swear I didn't know. He's not even my biological dad. Mom lied to both of us. Please talk to me, please. We made a mistake. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I need you. Just say something. I opened one. Just one, Natalie's. It started with Mark and ended 6 paragraphs later with "Please come back." I read it once, not twice. I didn't reply. Instead, I tapped delete. Then I went into the settings and disabled message previews. The noise could wait. The silence could stay. Diane had left 4 voicemails. I could see the timestamps. One just after the ceremony, one an hour later, one at midnight. The last one came at 3:17 ante meridiem, Italian time. I pressed play, held the phone to my ear. Her voice was wrecked. The kind of wrecked you don't get from alcohol, the kind that comes from watching something you built collapse while you're still holding the last brick. I just want to talk. I know what I said and I know you're angry, but none of this was supposed to happen like this. He wasn't even her father, Mark. He wasn't. And I didn't know what to do. And now she's locked herself in the bathroom and Evan won't even look at me. And people left before dessert. I ended it there, swiped it into oblivion. What did they expect? A flight back? A teary confrontation? Closure? No, they didn't get to choose the terms anymore. Not after I gave them 18 years and got discarded like a thrift store photo frame, still intact but too plain to keep on display. They chose theater. I chose exit. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo from Natalie. Her in the bridal suite, eyes swollen, makeup streaked. She'd captioned it, "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Delete." This wasn't revenge. I wasn't some martyr with a scorecard. This was something deeper, colder, the kind of distance that doesn't scream. It just steps away so quietly no one realizes they've lost you until they can't find the echo. I poured another glass of wine. Then I took a photo of the sea, gentle, wide, and different, added it to the album, Freedom, and I turned my phone off. 1 month later, I stepped off the plane into a humid southern morning that clung to your skin like a secret. Savannah in June doesn't welcome you, it dares you. I rolled my carry-on across the parking garage, tanned, calm, lighter. Not just in baggage, soul, too. Like I'd been pressure-washed in Mediterranean salt and came back someone they wouldn't recognize. I didn't go home. Not because I was scared, because it wasn't home anymore. Just coordinates where a man used to matter. Instead, I picked up a rental and pointed it toward downtown. Windows down, Ray-Bans on, Sinatra low on the stereo. No destination, just motion. At one red light, I found myself turning instinctively, muscle memory pulling me toward the old neighborhood. I let it happen, a slow drive. The way you'd glance at an obituary photo. The house was the same, but smaller. Funny how that happens. Trim still peeling. Porch swing missing, probably broken. I noticed the hydrangeas I planted were dying. Overwatered or underfed. Couldn't tell, didn't care. There was a car in the driveway I didn't recognize. Small, white, tires balding. Maybe Evans, maybe a contractor. Maybe Alan's latest ride to nowhere. Whatever it was, it blocked the spot where I used to park after work. Tired but proud. I didn't slow down, didn't blink, just passed it like it was a gas station I didn't need. Downtown was brighter, cleaner. I parked near an old bookstore, tucked behind a coffee shop I liked before things got complicated. Walked inside, the air conditioning hit like a baptism. I went straight to nonfiction, then history, then travel, my new favorites. And that's when I saw her, Diane, across the aisle holding a paperback, reading the back cover, pretending to absorb it. But she wasn't reading, she was watching. Her fingers trembled. I locked eyes with her. No anger, no bitterness, just a nod like you'd give a stranger who opened a door for you at a gas station. Her lips parted, maybe to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to beg. I turned, walked past biographies, past memoirs, past shelves full of things that might have once mattered. She didn't follow. Outside, the air was heavy but alive. I ordered a coffee and took a seat in the sun. My phone vibrated once in my pocket, reflexive, as if the past was still trying to crawl back. I didn't check it. I sipped my drink, pulled out the latest postcard I'd picked up in Florence. On the back I wrote, "You don't bury ghosts. You walk past them like they were never yours to carry." I dropped it in the mailbox outside the shop. No address. It wasn't meant to be sent. It was meant to end. I don't know what happened between Diane and Natalie after that. I don't care. They erased me. So I returned the favor quietly, entirely. And the thing about being erased, when you do it right, you haunt them anyway.